Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer at Orthogonal. Very briefly about Orthogonal, we are in the business of improving patient outcomes faster by helping companies accelerate the development of software as a medical device, connected device systems, and digital therapeutics. And the way we do that is by fusing the best of modern software engineering and product management tools and techniques with MedTech's traditional focus on safety and effectiveness in a way that raises the bar across the board. Thank you for logging in today. We know you have a lot of things pressing for your time, and we appreciate you joining us. For those of you who haven't been there, we do these webinars about once a month, and our goal is to bring together industry experts and really share some good knowledge and learnings and insights about challenging problems we're all facing, particularly related to something related to software and medical devices. We're going to try and give you a maximum ROI for your time today. So from now, which is 12 Eastern until 12:50 Eastern, or whatever time zone you're in, we will get in the core content we promised you in the introduction and hopefully answer some questions as well. At that point, you can drop off and move on with your day. However, we'll stay on up to 90 minutes. If people have more questions they want to discuss, we're happy to keep going. And frequently, we get about 40% of our audience is still with us at 90 minutes. Our goal today is to really give you some gold nuggets, actionable gold nuggets you can walk away with, and really a framework for thinking about this topic. Two other quick things before we dive in. One, we value brutally candid feedback on these webinars. We're always looking to make them better, more valuable, attract more people. So we will reach out to you. I will reach out to you very likely by phone or email. So, if you get an email reply, if you get a phone call from an unknown 312 number, pick up, please. And I would really welcome your candid feedback on this, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The second one, which historically I didn't mention it, but apparently it wasn't obvious, which is that Orthogonal is a consulting firm, and we can help you accelerate your development of medical device software. So if that's a topic you'd like to discuss afterwards, either related to today's topic or anything related, by all means, reach out to us. And the same goes for our guest, Keith from Blur Product Development. And Keith can explain, whereas we're focused on the pure software side of medical devices, Keith's firm is experts at the hardware side of medical devices. So with all that, let's get going. So, it's been now 14 years since Mark Andreessen wrote the famous article in the Wall Street Journal where he said, software is eating the world. More and more of the value of business is being delivered by the software. And in the future, all companies will be software companies. MedTech's been on a lag, but that's definitely the case that more and more of the value of medical devices is being delivered through the software and the connectivity of software. And that's been a really exciting thing, but it's also been a real challenge in medtech. It's been a real challenge in every industry, but particularly medtech, because the tools and the techniques and the approaches for developing modern software vary a lot from the ways we approach building modern hardware. Biology, chemistry, physics, the engineering disciplines that support them, electrical, mechanical, biomedical, materials, tend to have a very different feel than software development. So we want to talk about how companies today can essentially make that leap or that bridge to incorporate software into their core expertise. A lot of great lessons learned over the last 15 years on this that we're going to share today. So first, I'll introduce our guests. Keith, maybe you could, longtime partner and friend of Orthogonal. We love working with you guys. So could you tell us a little bit about you and your firm and your expertise and why you got sucked into this today?
Sure. I'm Keith Gausmann. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and I've been one of the partners here at Blur for about 10 years. We do medical device development from conception through manufacturing. So we do all the mechanical, electrical systems engineering. We have full prototype labs. We're 1345 quality system certified. We do regulatory in-house, and then we also do manufacturing. And when we need to do the kind of things that Orthogonal does, we partner with Orthogonal. So that's kind of how I got roped into doing this today. So they've been a good partner with Blur. We work with them on a few different projects currently, and it's been a good partnership where we both see value and we get the work done and it gets done well for our clients. So
Excellent. Glad to have you. And Bernhard, can you introduce yourself, please? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Bernhard Kappe, founder and CEO of Orthogonal. I've been in software for about 30 years, and then about 14, 15 years ago, ended up getting into the medical software side of things. And, we've had this journey where we've really been, keeping in mind the whole purpose of medical device development, but also bringing modern methods in, and as those modern methods outside of medical device continue to evolve, how do we bridge those things together so we get the value of modern methods of faster feedback loops, of evolving products faster into the medical device space, so we can improve those patient outcomes, improve those lives faster.
Excellent. So why don't we get going with a high level topic? Obviously, the number one reason to take a traditional disconnected medical device and connect it is because it's really cool. And people like cool technology, right? Kind of makes your medical device like an iPhone. It's fun. You can show videos on it or, you know, browse Facebook. But other than that, besides cool, what might be another reason that you would even want to bother connecting a offline medical device to the internet in the larger world?
Keith, do you want to take it first, or you want me to?
Go ahead. It's all you.
So, I mean, I think there are a number of different reasons why people end up doing this, right? So, in general, as you mentioned before, software is eating the world, and every company has to become a software company. Outside of the medical device space, we see this happening. Everything is getting connected. Everything is more digitally enabled, and that's having profound impact on the world, how we live it, how productive we are, how quickly we get things done, et cetera. That is no different in the medical device space, right? So in the medical device space, it's happening at different speeds in different areas that people are getting more connected and more digital. Um, and so early on, we saw this with things like diabetes care or the radiology space that have been digital for a very long time, and it made an awful lot of sense where you could leverage things like mobile phones, cloud computing, connecting smartphones together with CGMs and with insulin pumps, and those have been very digital for a long time because it creates value and leverages the value of all of these other technologies in an ecosystem to do better for folks. I think other areas have been slower, but it's happening in a bunch of other areas where people are connecting these things together and starting to see the value. So, like orthopedics or surgical specialties are ones where this was not a particularly you know, heavy emphasis on digital ecosystems, even say 5 years ago. But over the last 5 years, people are connecting, surgical planning with surgical robots, with digital implants, and building ecosystems around that. And through that, they're able to just create more value throughout the process. And then we're seeing it in other areas as well, where simplest thing is you can put a sensor on something and you can collect information that is potentially useful, or you can potentially connect to a device and provide more convenience to end users as well. Those are all, some of the reasons that people start using it, but then over time, as they get more sophisticated, they find new and additional things they can do with digital to transform their businesses.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I think our customers they kind of go down this path of connected devices for three reasons. One is it's a user experience issue, and they want a different or better user experience where it's interactive. It also, that can also be enhanced with some sort of AI or machine learning that you can get with connecting. And then that goes into probably the biggest reason that a lot of our customers want to take either their new products or their existing products there, and that is the collection of data. And there's so many uses for that, not just on the user side and the user experience side, but also on the business side and collecting that data. So it seems like more and more our customers, that's what they want. They want the big database. They don't always know what they're going to use that for, but they know they're going to need it, and they know that they can use it in ways they haven't imagined today. So we set up the systems, in development, so that they have those options, and not that they're going to roll them out on day one, but that they can eventually as well.
I've got a couple of examples, sort of like in areas where we're seeing this a lot. So, like nerve stimulators, peripheral nerve stimulators have become more and more digitally enabled over time. Some of this has been, one reason why people do this is someone else came up with something that is more connected and works better, and then they need to leapfrog those folks. So there's competitive pressures in some industries. One company starts doing it, gets a competitive advantage, then others end up having to follow, right? And so in these areas, once you're connecting, say, a peripheral nerve stimulator, a mobile app is probably a better interface for an end user than like a traditional remote, right? You can collect more data. It's just something they're used to. They don't have to carry an extra thing around with them to get pain relief. But once they're doing this, one of the things you can potentially do then is collect more information, for example, on their symptoms. And companies actually end up using this kind of information as part of their ongoing work on, demonstrating the effectiveness of their product, and in some cases are able to then get new indications based on that data they collected. There is a customer service aspect of this as well, where especially if you are a company that is growing very quickly, you have a better mousetrap than other people, but there is a high touch aspect to it. If you have a connected device and you have a mobile app and you have cloud backend, you can potentially use this to reduce the burden on your customer service organization. And in many cases, that is one of the constraint factors on growth, that you just can't hire enough people, train them up quickly enough, right? So we're seeing it in that space heavily, but that applies to a lot of other areas as well.
All right, so a lot of good opportunities.
I've
Why is
got one more important opportunity that I think we should talk about, which is the idea that in some cases companies are changing from being just device manufacturers to being service companies, where there are services wrapped around the device and they're creating value that way, right? And then software obviously is something that you use to support those services. A great example is the company Transmedics. Transmedics has a device for transporting organs, perfused organs, livers, hearts, and lungs. And class 3 medical device, great device. When they got to market, their sales were flat, and their stock price was kind of flat to being less valuable. They ended up transforming their business to be a service business, where basically through the National Organ Care System network, they provide door-to-door, end-to-end services from organ recovery all the way through. And once they started doing that, their revenue started increasing 50% per quarter, and their stock price went from about 200 million to well over 5 billion over the course of 4 years. They bought an airline. As part of that, they have software and connectivity, as you would imagine, to support all of that. And the benefit of that in a service business is pretty striking to be able to do that. So I think there are other areas where I think we are going to see some more new business models or extensions of business models to provide service along the way, and that's one of the areas where connected systems and software really shine.
MedTech as a service.
That's right.
MedTech as a service coming your way. Everything is a service. I just saw the acronym XaaS is in everything is or anything as a service. All right,
There you go.
Great opportunities. Why is it hard? Why not just do it? Why not just start doing connected software if you're a established device company? Keith, like.
Well, it's all about what your talent and what you have in the building. And so, what we end up doing here is we have a lot of different customers. It's similar to a lot of other things. We have a lot of different customers who, first of all, they come to us because they might not have certain expertise. Maybe they have mostly mechanical engineers or whatever. They're not doing electromechanical kind of stuff, or they don't have any software systems engineers. And so a lot of it, and this is no different, a lot of companies, they just don't have that infrastructure. They don't have the talent in the building, and they don't have the people who know how to manage it. And so you really have a choice when you're faced with that. You can either try to hire it all internally, you can take it all externally, or you can do a hybrid. And where you have a couple people internally, you figure out what the kind of long-term needs going to be there, so that you can staff that full time into the future. And then you also want to be able to manage it, and that's something that you can learn to do. And we've had a lot of instances here at Blur where we'll have a company come in. They don't. The best example of this is they mainly do mechanical products, and they don't really have a systems kind of engineer or systems level people. And we'll take the approach of, we'll start the program for them. We'll kind of train their program managers in how to do that, how to look at, how to think about systems. Same thing as with software. We do some work here as well, where we train people how to look at it, how to develop it, how to do it within design controls, all that kind of stuff. And then over time, you hire it in as you need it to kind of start taking some of that execution away, especially if it's going to be there forever. And a lot of that with software type products and software, and whether it's on firmware or on product software, or even the connected stuff, that's stuff that's going to constantly, that's your customer facing stuff. It's going to be constantly changing over time. You obviously have bugs and things like that you need to fix. So our customers generally find a lot of value in over time, because it does take a lot of time to find the right type of person in the medical space that can not just write the code, but can do the design controls. And that's a big point, and something that's really difficult to find. But we've even taken the approach of, we'll help our customers find those people. And we have a few of them here in the office. They just live here. They work with us. We're kind of like, we have like-minded people. So if they're hanging out at the other office, they don't have people they can learn from. But there's the hybrid approach works really well with our customers. They start with us, and then they grow their internal team to an appropriate size based on the long-term needs, and then they learn how to manage the process as well, which is that's super important. Every customer needs, and every company needs to understand that. So that way you can budget in the future. What's coming. How to create those timelines, and what kind of technical effort things take when you're asked to do them.
Yeah, it's remarkable, right? We do very similar things in that regard. People will come to us because, again, we know how to do this, and we have worked with lots of people and know how to do this software stuff efficiently, but also how to integrate in and interact with hardware and firmware as well, which is one of the reasons why we and Blur work so well together. Is we know what those interfaces look like between those areas, and when and how you need to interface once you are building a connected system. Um, I think when you're dealing with software that is, on general computing platforms, cloud, web, mobile, connected in, there are definitely some things that are new and different, that are, I think, take a different, both different talent, different skills, but different pace and different organization from when you're just doing something that is mechanical. Um, Production and distribution is is very different. The software, there is no assembly line. Distribution is it's software. Distribution is DevOps and DevSecOps in many cases. Um, you're in a connected device system, so you can't really fire and forget, right? You can't just, oh, we're done. You're never really done with it because you don't, you're sitting on top of environments that you don't fully control. Those mobile platforms, cloud, web, all those things keep evolving. And then if you have firmware on a connected device, those things for cybersecurity reasons obviously also need to be patchable and need to continue to evolve. The good news is cloud, mobile, all these people keep investing to make that overall infrastructure faster and better and more powerful. So you get the good as well as the costs with that. That's one of the reasons why you end up building things on top of these things. It's just uh, you're getting so much benefit out of being on top of those environments, but that means you have to continue to maintain this. You have to do cybersecurity monitoring. There are ongoing operational costs and infrastructure costs that you have to take into consideration. If you end up building sort of the know-how and the ability to do all of that from scratch at the beginning, that's a pretty big undertaking, and can frankly cost a lot of money before you even start seeing value. So that's why, a lot of cases people maybe start with a partner who has that all those capabilities, um, while they build up the parts of the staff and while they learn along the way. Um, it's a faster way of getting to value and of avoiding some of the mistakes that you would make by doing it purely on your own at the start.
So let me drill in on one point you both raised. Actually, it didn't even come up in our prep call, but I think it's interesting before we dive into some of the different skill sets. If you're hiring a mechanical engineer with 5 years experience who's brand new to medical device, and you're hiring a software app developer, an iPhone app developer with 5 years experience, and they've never worked with a medical device, is there a fundamental difference in their onboarding? Is it harder or different for one than the other to learn
Yeah,
design controls?
yeah, there is. I think if you're doing design controls as a mechanical engineer, it's pretty straightforward. You kind of got to know what to fill in and the process of the design controls. But as a software engineer, there's a way to write software and there's a way to test software, and to do those different design controls. That's a lot more in depth, depending upon the class of device. So, hiring a software engineer with the ability, first of all, hiring software engineers who can also write design controls is tough. They need experience doing that, or someone needs to be experienced to guide them. Um, the other part of that is just having that process in place. And if you're a company that doesn't already have that process in place, doesn't have those forms, doesn't have those SOPs, doesn't have, especially the cybersecurity stuff, which is kind of brand new, and is changing, and just everyone's kind of trying to figure that out. Um, that's a hard thing to do, and it's well, it's not hard. It's just you don't know what you're doing yet. So once you kind of know what you're doing and you have that process, it's not difficult to do, but it is time consuming. And we've seen a lot of companies walk through here that have software written for various applications and firmware, whatever, that wasn't written under design control because it was written by someone who didn't have any experience with that, and they just didn't pay attention to that. And it's an absolute mess, and it has to be fixed. And you don't want to do that after the fact, because like that the mechanical stuff and the electrical stuff, you can fix that a lot easier after the fact than you can the software stuff. You want to get that on the right track up front.
And that's just because software is more dynamic and complicated and more ins and outs and whatnots.
Well, it needs to be documented in a certain way, and the mechanical stuff and the electrical stuff doesn't. They need design controls, obviously, but it's a different way of documenting it and testing it. That is it's just easier. Like, for instance, like one of our mechanical engineers could go design something, and I could turn around and write the design controls for that, and that would be not a difficult task for me to do, or really any of our mechanical engineers. Same with the electrical stuff. What we tell our customers is, if you're writing software, the person who writes the software needs to do those design controls, because it's so specific and so ingrained into their code that I can't just look, one of our software engineers just can't look at it and see what you've done as I can with mechanical and electrical stuff. And so, that the same as what we tell our customers, like if they walk in the door and they've written a piece of software and they want us to do the design controls on that software, we tell them no. Like, your software person needs to write those design controls. It's really important. And otherwise it's not going to be correct. And so and they end up, we'll teach you how to do it. We'll train you into proper methods and how you document it and all the different, um, forms and procedures you need to follow. But the writer of the code needs to write those design controls, which is different than the mechanical or electrical stuff.
And I think we take a slightly different approach because we are very software centric, right? And so I don't if I have a new delivery manager, let's say product owner, product manager, I have a new um, software developer, et cetera. It's ideal if they already have a bunch of experience in the medical device space, but I care more that they are good at engineering and at software development, because what we have is a process and a set of teams and knowledge that people have, um, especially in what I so it's a team that is doing that work in our case, right? Um, and so we have quality systems engineers that know that very well, that know how to interact with architects and how to interact with developers. And so that when you're doing as well as delivery managers who understand how to you know write and describe user needs and requirements, and then together they know how to sort of uh, do specifications, test automation, and work together also on risk management, risk controls, et cetera. Um, in software, it is very hard for any one person to know all of that, and so that's why we take very much of a team approach to doing that. One of the things that I think is hardest for, and I would say especially non-device companies that go and start doing things under design controls, is it works really well if you have a disciplined software development approach, right? Not all developers are taught that. There's agile in the cowboy agile way where you just go out, code, we'll document later, we'll do all this later. And that is, as Keith said, it's really, really hard to deal with that stuff and to clean that up. if you end up with a disciplined approach where you are doing things like test-driven development, behavior-driven design already, where documentation is sort of comes out of the work that you're doing, uh, it is so much easier to do design controls on top of that if you have that discipline. It is much harder to take undisciplined developers or undisciplined development teams and teach them to become disciplined. That's the biggest problem there, not the design controls, because the design controls that you do on top of that leverages all of that if you do it right.
So it's interesting because what you've described to some extent is there's some existing disciplines in medical device that are different when you throw software in. And then there's some brand new disciplines, so to speak, under the software world that you may not have dealt with at all as you're building a connected device. Maybe let's dive into those. Let's start with a couple of the existing ones. I'll rattle off a couple and let's talk about what's different. Forget your software engineers, all the other people in your organization you need to deal with. Human factors and user experience, I'll put those together. QA, RA, QMS, systems engineering. What's new and different for people in those roles when all of a sudden your device is connected, has an app, has a cloud backend, incorporates AI, etc.?
Keith, you want to take it or should I?
Go ahead.
So I think one of the big things that is different is just the speed with which this stuff happens, right? This also comes back to, hey, there's stuff that is outside of your control that you are having to deal with, right? And I think the internet and the mobile cloud, internet of everything ecosystem moves at a very different pace than people are used to. So where you could potentially in a large organization have a bunch of silos and pass things along, you've got to be much more integrated. And even if you're moving slower than, say, a company that is delivering new software into the market every 2 weeks, you have to be able to move faster, uh, and be more integrated than before. So it's not we're just going to do some stuff up front, we're going to do some stuff in the end, and that's I'm obviously you don't do that all the time, but there is the ability to be much more waterfall that I think is difficult to do when you are trying to move, when you need to, at least for some of the things, move at internet speed. The other thing is there are reasons why you might need to, but there are also competitive reasons why it is better to be able to get feedback faster, get feedback from the market faster, and incorporate that in as you go from sort of first baby steps to being in a competitive market like in the diabetes space where you have to be moving faster. There's a huge advantage to those who can move faster. You've got to start thinking about more agile organization and more less silos and more one team approach, or really strong integration between teams as well.
Is there a difference between moving at internet speeds and move fast and break things as opposed to moving faster but maintaining safety and effectiveness? It's unique to our space.
So I would say that if you are not doing something safety critical and not doing something that lots and lots of people are depending on, then you can probably take a lot more liberties. Um, I would say that, but that obviously be for regulatory reasons, but also just even as a business, if folks are depending on it, you probably can't move fast and break things. I would not say that companies like Amazon or Microsoft with, Azure and AWS are moving fast and breaking things, right? That people are depending on that software, and they have developed very, very sophisticated ways of moving fast and not breaking things. So I would say, you can move fast and not break things, but it requires discipline and failovers and all kinds of things to be able to do that.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that that's like one of the major differences when you start to get into things like this in the mindset of developing medical devices. When you develop an electromechanical piece of hardware, you develop it, you test it, and then it's locked in, and you go build it. And you already know, like, if you need to make changes, there's a whole process that's going to go. You have to retool stuff. You've got to, get new boards made. You have to do all these things, and it's not quick. Once you're the speed at which you can make change in a medical device and the hardware side is, once you get down that path to 90-95% done, it takes a long time, and people know that. Software is a little bit different, and so you have to be diligent about building the rigor into your process to make sure that you're testing it appropriately and that you're following your procedures and you're following your design controls and your testing process, even though it seems simple. The time's kind of already built in on the electromechanical device side. You have to be diligent about creating that time on the software side, because you don't need all the extra time to go make stuff and put it together. It's already done, and you compile it, and you're ready to roll. And you need to have the discipline there to make sure it's tested appropriately and goes through all of the rigor that you would, not just for safety and effectiveness of a medical device, but for business reasons too. You don't want to put out a product that fails and screws things up. That's no good either. So
I would say moving fast, right? There's a part of sort of moving fast that you just have to do, or moving faster because of what you're dealing with. But there's moving fast because of that, and there's moving fast because there is a competitive advantage to moving fast, right? If and moving fast in terms of overall faster evolution of your product, um, there's a difference between, releases every 2 years, every year, every 6 months, every 3 months, every month, every 2 weeks, that require more optimization and uh, more automation, et cetera, that cost money, frankly, to do. So you have to also think about your readiness, your need to move that fast over time. The more mature the market that you're in, and the more mature, your competitors are, the more you have to push towards that. But at the beginning, you probably, you need to crawl, walk, then run, unless you are jumping into a market that is already, very, very mature and sophisticated.
So when you talk about different kinds of skills, and even in software, you have different kinds of skills, maybe you guys could elucidate a little bit on one high level point, which I think sometimes isn't clear to a lot of people, which is, in the world of medical devices, there's almost three completely different kinds of software developers. Forget testing and quality and cybersecurity and infrastructure. And they're really, like, you're trained very differently for them. You have people who specialize in firmware and embedded and low-level code. It's usually resident inside a physical device. You have software people who are building connected software, so that could be cloud or mobile, and even then people typically have majors and minors or specialties in that. You refer to that as sort of connected software broadly. And then you have people who train AI algorithms, and are doing that. And that's really sort of data engineers and data scientists. Very few people work across all of those disciplines. Why is that? And what is a a firm getting into this, bridging over into connected software or AI ML need to understand as they start to build out their skills?
Well, we have very different people here that do those, and we have a couple people that can do all of them, but that's pretty rare. And usually the combo that they can do is the software and the firmware side. Not all of them can. Not all of our software engineers, software firmware engineers can do both, but a couple of them can. And they have to want to do that, and not all of them want to do that. The data science and the algorithm piece is a little bit different. And I would argue, as someone who hires, our company hires people that can do that. We don't necessarily look for software and firmware engineers who can do that piece of things. We know that's asking a lot of someone. If they have it, great. But we also have we have several mechanical engineers here who can do that kind of stuff, or we have a couple electrical engineers who can do that kind of stuff. And so they do that. They write the equations. They figure them out in whatever MATLAB or whatever other program they want to use to get that work, and then we transfer them into the code, into the firmware, the software code. And that's a process that works pretty well. It's faster. You can prototype it, and but it doesn't need to be the same person. And I would argue that it actually would be probably pretty difficult to find the same person. And even though we have that ability here with a few people, we rarely use it because of, they're just too busy doing, what they do. So and you can find more people that can do the data science algorithm type piece.
Yeah, I think there is, this is like anything else where you have this, expanding knowledge base, expanding set of techniques and ways of doing things that are happening. You could ask, why don't you have one doctor who can be an anesthesiologist, a neurosurgeon, or an orthopedic surgeon, an internist, an endocrinologist, et cetera, et cetera? And the answer is, well, they could, but they wouldn't be very good at doing any one of those things, right? And so I think there's enough here that is really the same type of thing. There's a reason why you end up learning and specializing and working on these things as a doctor. I think the same thing goes for engineers and engineering disciplines. Can be extremely valuable for an organization and for teams to have people that can bridge between those things. I know both Blur and we have people that on the Bluetooth side know enough about both sides of it between the mobile app and the firmware, how to make those things work. Where being able to sort of work together and bridge those things is super valuable. And I think that's, again, if we draw the analogy to the medical professions, right? There are places that have wrestled with this problem of how do we get all of these individual experts to work together, and that they have essentially integrators or people um, that are know enough about the different specialties to work together. So data science, AI, that's a particular set of knowledge and experience. Doing work in mobile, doing work in cloud, backend, those are all separate things. We try to get enough people to be T-shaped, so that they have enough knowledge so they can jump in and understand what the other side is doing. And so if you have a bunch of T-shaped people working together or across organizations, you end up with faster feedback loops, and a team that gets a lot more done than if you had a whole bunch of individuals that knew everything and were doing everything, right?
We're coming up towards our time, so I want to make sure we cover all the core topics. You guys have brought up cybersecurity a couple of times. Why now? What's different? I mean, it's not new. What's different on the risk side? What's different on the regulation side? What's different on the skill side that the company should be aware of when they're all of a sudden opening up their devices, right? The cybersecurity regulation by the FDA now says that your device doesn't even have to be connected. It just have to have a port where it could be connected, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the FDA issued a guidance on that recently. So, everyone's paying attention to it. No one's done it. Not in, so everyone's kind of trying to figure out what to do and how to do it from a design control point of view and a risk point of view. And so, we've spent a good amount of time over the past, 2024 writing our, cybersecurity SOPs, and then, looking at that process and figuring out what needs to be done. It's like you still need to go through some submissions to understand if that's accepted and like where the feedback is. So that whole loop is not really occurred yet. And although I think we have a product or two we've submitted here recently that should have some of that in it, so we'll start getting some feedback. But that's really, that's really the thing, is there's more scrutiny on it, and
Yeah.
and so you want to make sure you're doing all the things that you need to, and you're following your process, and that your process is correct and it's meeting expectations.
Yeah, I would say, right, this is all as a result of, that fundamental, driver of software eating the world, right? Just everything gets more connected and therefore more dependent and potentially more vulnerable, whether it is a power plant, or it is an implanted medical device, right? And I think, uh, um, the federal government is, and the FDA certainly are acutely aware of the risks that an more connected world poses, and they have to balance, just as we have to balance the, you know, the the pros and the cons, the dangers as well as the potential benefits, right? And so this is very much of a, if you look at what the guidance says, right? It's been out there in draft form for a while, and I don't expect this to be the last guidance that the FDA issues around cybersecurity. Um, but you know, once you are connected, um, as a device, you are now connected to the internet, to different things, and you have to start doing things at the speed of the internet. I think that's the biggest thing, right? You now need to uh, think about cybersecurity throughout your product lifecycle. Cybersecurity does not stop at the boundary of the medical device. You have to look at the things that could be attack vectors to your medical device or your medical device ecosystem. And you've got to design for safety, and you've got to continue to monitor and maintain that safety. So it's an operational burden that you have. You do obviously have to write your SOPs, not just your making sure that you're taking cybersecurity into consideration at design time, but throughout your entire product life cycle, as part of what you're doing. So that is a different set of skills and a different operating model that companies are having to do, and so we're in addition to developing things for them, we're helping companies set up those SOPs and those processes as well, to make sure that it's not that they're actually meeting the post-market and pre-market cybersecurity um, requirements.
I think we have time for one last topic. So let's drill on a related one. It's kind of a funny little one, but it came up yesterday in our prep call. And I think it's really interesting, which is that in addition to now having R&D teams working on the same device who are software and hardware or UX, there's also one new party that sometimes shows up in the room, which seems like a very unusual one in medtech, which is corporate IT. Um, What's that all about? And what are some of the challenges and best practices around that?
So it's again, obviously depends on the maturity of the organization. It's a different problem set for a large distributed uh, organization with lots of business units and a sophisticated corporate IT department, although there are issues we see in those as well. But I think one of the things is, software. Who knows software in the organization? Oh, corporate IT knows software. Who knows, you know, operational issues around software? Corporate IT does. And so we've seen this in some cases where, you know, doing digital product development and the sort of back end and the and mobile development, all of that ends up going to corporate IT by default. And some, with varying levels of success, but certainly if you would think about who operationally is the most likely person to have to maintain something and to keep the lights on, et cetera. Well, within an organization, if they have corporate IT and they already have things on the cloud and they have ERP systems and CRM systems and production systems and, et cetera, corporate IT is the natural one that people end up getting involved because unless you already have a digital organization, they're the people that know software best, right?
Oh, wait, looks like we got a question in here. I want to ask about the overall governance. What are the most important topics you need for sustainable dev and ops?
So I think the first thing that I would say is you have to think about this as a continuous life cycle, right? So as you are, it is not, uh, it is, it may be just dev the first time you are building something and you haven't released anything into the market. You don't need to worry about ops. But as soon as you have the first product in a pilot or a trial, right, you're doing both dev and ops, and you are likely over time, getting new things from dev to ops and back and taking feedback through. So the most important thing from a governance perspective is to think about it continuously and design for the fact that it is not fire and forget, right? And so uh, that's that how you organize, how you do your sustaining releases, right? Your how you are getting feedback from the products in the field. You're collecting data. You can get more feedback. How do you bring that back in? I think that's ultimately, those are all the pieces that need to work together, and you need to drive towards an efficient process throughout the way. And that means how you write your SOPs, how you organize, how you go and collect that additional data and feed it back into your ongoing development processes.
Okay. I think we're at the end of questions, so I would say let's quit while we're ahead, and on a high note. So thank you everybody for joining. Just as a quick reminder, please pick up the phone or respond if we reach out to you looking for feedback on this webinar or suggestions on future ones. Also, feel free to contact Keith at Blur or Bernhard or I at Orthogonal if you want to continue conversations or possibly need any help or just have some questions on some of these topics. Thank you very much, all. We appreciate your time. Keith, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It was fun.